the House please come to order? Something about standing up here just makes people want to do that. I'm sorry. So welcome to Farmers Night, a State House tradition for over 100 years, and welcome to the People's House and our beautiful House Chamber. I'm Representative John Bartholomew, and along with Representative Mary Catherine Stone and Senator Allison Clarkson, produced Farmers Night. I think Allison is here somewhere. There's Allison back here. We obviously can't do this alone. Each week we take a moment to acknowledge all the people who make this series possible. The state curator and his staff, I think I saw David here, and did I see Mary here somewhere? In numerous ways, including programming, graphic design, and publicity, and clearly something they're doing with publicity is working, so great. Also, our Sergeant-at-Arms, she helps us with our logistics, and our Capitol Police, who work overtime to keep the building open into the evening. And of course, last but not least, we thank all of you for being here. So we obviously can't do this without an audience, so thank you. We've got some great stuff coming up this season. We'll be here every week, except for town meeting week, up until through April 8th. We got performances coming of dance, music, and poetry. So check the legislative website, you can see the full schedule. Next week, the Vermont Symphony Orchestra and Chorus. Generally, that is a very crowded event, so if you're coming to that, I suggest you get here early. And generally, just so you know, spoiler note, generally the orchestra faces that way, so if you want to pretend you're in the audience, you can sit over here and see them. If you want to pretend you're in the orchestra and watching the conductor, you sit on that side. As soon as I say that, they'll switch, but in any case, that's usually how they set up. All right, so that brings us to tonight. We have a very special sponsors for tonight's performance, the Vermont Department of Forests, Parks, and Recreation, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I don't know that they have ever sponsored a Farmers Night event before. Does anybody? I don't remember one. So anyway, we're going to have a curated story. So, this evening, a curated story hour that's entitled Stories from the Woods. And I'd like to introduce our MC for the evening, direct from Forests, Parks, and Recreation, Elise Shaler.
Okay, good evening. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, welcome to Stories from the Woods. Thank you all for being here. This is awesome. It's like a full house, which is really, really wonderful. My name is Elise Shadler. I am the program manager of our state's urban and community forestry program, but tonight I also get to wear the hat of your MC for the evening. So again, welcome, and I'm happy to be here on behalf of the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So we have asked 6 Vermonters whose work and identity is partly or wholly formed by their experiences in the forests to come and be our storytelling lineup, and these nice, wonderful folks are right behind me. And the ask to them was fairly simple. We asked for them to think of and design and share a personal story that reflects their connection to the woods. That's pretty much it. So we're really excited to hear what they all have to say. As I introduce each one, I'll make some brief biographical notes, and our storytellers will come up and speak to you. And then when all the stories have been told, we'll ask our Commissioner of Forest, Parks, and Rec, Daniel Fisco, and our Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife, Jason Batchelder, to come and make some closing remarks. I do ask that you silence your phones if you have not already done so, as a distraction to the storytellers. I would love to thank these wonderful people in advance, and also another round of applause and thank you to Aaron Marcus and Joy Barton, our musicians, for the evening. They welcomed us into the space, and they will also usher us out at the end. And all told, we really hope that you leave tonight feeling connected, a little grounded, and perhaps eager to spend some time amongst the trees. the woods afterwards. Maybe not tonight. So I have this is a hobby of mine, this business of storytelling and coordinating these events. And for the past 15 years or so, I've been doing this, as I mentioned, as a hobby, not as a profession. But I've hosted storytelling events in barns and in summery backyards and in wineries and orchards and galleries and perhaps my favorite in the Moran plant in Burlington before it was constructed. We all wore hard hats. But I never in my wildest dreams could imagine that I would be hosting one in this amazing space. So before we enter the woods, I thought we would spend a moment thinking about this remarkable room. I'm going to ask David Sheets, who is our state curator, to come and say a couple of words about this space, which he probably knows better than any person.
Thank you, Elise. I'm actually going to invoke the spirit of a man who caused this building to happen. He was the most important commissioner and took his responsibility as a commissioner to oversee every detail of rebuilding the State House after a catastrophic fire took out its predecessor. His name, George Perkins Marsh. And that man, indeed, Allison is excited because he is from Woodstock. And Woodstock had a huge role as a community because the superintendent of construction for the building was from Woodstock. And that was in part, again, because of George Perkins Marsh. But many of you, I'm guessing, know his name best. Not so much for his love of Renaissance-inspired architecture, as much as Man and Nature, the book that literally created America's conservation and ecological movements. And were it not for that book, in fact, I don't think any of us would understand how important it was in transitioning to a population of people who were fighting against nature to one where nature began to be embraced and the human impact on nature began to be understood. And we have George Perkins Marsh to thank for that. And that was no small thing whatsoever. We have a book called Intimate Grandeur that celebrates the restoration of the State House that took place in the 80s and the 90s. And that book has on its cover a Jeb Wallace Broder photograph that we knew would be unique among state capitals because Jeb was up at National Life before drones, because the book goes back, and before drones made it easy to take shots like that. He trained his lens on the dome, completely surrounded by the forest behind. But when the State House was built, there was no forest on this hillside. It was a denuded hillside. And that was the deforestation of Vermont in the early 19th century was definitely one of the motivating factors that caused George Perkins Marsh to want to reclaim the woods. So thinking about him tonight and invoking his spirit to come down to join our storytellers is exactly what we need to do. Thank you.
Our first storyteller for the evening is Shelby Perry. Shelby was raised in the forests of Vermont and has made a career of understanding and protecting them. She currently works as the Wildlands Ecology Director at Northeast Wilderness Trust. When not working in them, Shelby can usually be found playing in Vermont's forests, exploring them on foot, in snowshoes, or through the lens of her camera. Thank you, Elise. Can everyone hear me? Yes, great, okay, just making sure. Microphones make me nervous, so I have to start by asking them. Feel better? My story starts in the forest, of course, about 13 miles straight north of here, deep in Worcester Woods. I'm staring at a plant, and it's covered with these little yellow ovals, and they're hanging there, they're sort of shiny, they're bright yellow, and they're attached to the plant with something that sort of skirts the line between slug slime and spider silk. And I'm there to try to identify it, but I can't recognize it as like animal, vegetable, or mineral. I have no idea what this thing is. It looks like bug eggs, but if you like scooped it all into a pile, it would be bigger than any bug I know of that lives in the state of Vermont. And I'm sort of stumped. I'm there mapping natural communities for a project, a conservation project where I'm supposed to make management recommendations. And it was in that moment that I realized that there might be some ramifications to these management recommendations that I might never understand. I'm gonna rewind a little from there and say, I grew up in rural Vermont, in Corinth. I was born right up the hill here in Berlin. And though we all know Vermont soil grows rocks best of all, in my family garden, what came up with the rocks every spring was also some human history, little shards of plates and broken glass and things that sort of hinted at a human history going back way longer than my family had been there, to the family of settlers who had the original homestead on that property. And that was a lens that I started to develop. I was always seeing that human lens on the landscape. I would see orchards even when they were overtopped by trees, and fields even when they had been filled in by forest. I brought that lens with me everywhere, including to my training as a naturalist. And when I went out on this project, mapping natural communities in 15,000 acres of forestry land in central Vermont, I brought that lens with me. I went looking for natural communities, and I kept finding human ones. Until that day, I'm looking at this thing, and I realized that the forest and all of the life within it is so much bigger than what I could see or understand. And what does that mean? You know, when I'm making management recommendations for a web of life that I might not be able to see all of, that I might not understand all of. And it wasn't that moment, that was, you know, I was like, oh, there's a thing, I don't know what it is, and I took a bunch of pictures and I went home. So that wasn't like the moment of shift, but it was certainly the beginning of it. I went back to my desk and I pulled out field guides, and I went online and I Googled and I called people that I knew. I was at UVM, I had all sorts of resources at my disposal, and I could not figure out what this thing was. And nobody could tell me. And it wasn't until months later when somebody identified the observation on the citizen science app, iNaturalist, that I learned what it was. And it was a slime mold. And I didn't even know slime molds existed. So, slime molds are hard to find information about. I had been bumping up on the edges of my knowledge, but I had also been bumping up on the edges of human knowledge. Slime molds are not well understood, they're not well studied. The information about them out there, a lot of it is wrong. It's like well-meaning, but wrong. And so I then embarked on a learning journey, which I will share some of the benefits of to you now. Slime molds, they fruit like fungi. That's what I was seeing fruiting bodies, those little egg-looking things. They crack open and release spores. The specific one I found is called insect egg slime mold. That's the common name, Leocarpus fragilis, if you're into those names. It's more closely related to an animal than a fungi, though. Most of its life cycle is spent in the form of a plasmodium, which is like one big cell that streams around on the forest floor. It's a predator. It engulfs and digests its food as it moves around on the forest floor. And they're beautiful. They're intricately, beautifully, entirely beautiful in ways that we mostly don't notice because they're very small. And that simul sort of started this moment for me where I started thinking about how big the forest is and how much more life is out there than what I understand. And I think that might have been part of what led to what I do now, which is to protect wild places, because I think some places should be wild so that all things have a place to live out their lives, even if we don't understand them. Thank you. Next up, we have Eric Noose. Eric is a retired game warden who patrolled Lamoille County for 32 years. He is an avid hunter, fisher, forager, and conservationist. Folks from outside Lamoille County may know of Eric through the Wild Vermont Adventures of Vermont Game Warden's books, which chronicles some of his stories. To Eric, Green River Reservoir State Park and Forest is a special place where he has connected deeply with nature over many, many years.
Yeah, sorry, I gotta take this fake tooth out so you can hear me. My wife says that I might be a redneck if I store my tooth in a bait container there. In a bait container that used to formerly have maggots in it. Well, you get that way when you're a game warden. You get used to most everything. How many folks have ever canoed or hiked or done anything up at Green River Reservoir? Oh, wonderful. Well, you know what I'm going to be talking about then. I first got introduced to Green River through Red Hooper. He had been the warden of Lamoille County for over 40 years, and he was retiring in 1972. I just finished a year of training and was assigned to Lamoille County. And Red said, let's go paddle on Green River. I've got to show you that reservoir. So out we went. We paddled up to the north end, and suddenly, from the depths, up came an adult loon, just yards from our canoe. 3/4 of the way out of the water, flapping its wings like mad, looking at us with those beady red eyes, and yodeling crazily. I go, whoa, look at this thing. I didn't know it at the time, but that was one of 6 pair of nesting loons in the whole state of Vermont. They were almost extirpated from Vermont. Now we've got over 200 nesting pairs around. But I've got so many memories of 50 years of paddling, fishing, hiking, hunting, and fishing up in that area. So I'll just throw out a few of them to you. One real memorable one was I was camping with my wife and our granddaughters, who were about 5 or 6, on the Big Island. Early morning, I'm watching the lake drinking coffee, and I see some wakes out in the lake. I said, what the heck's that? So I got my binoculars and looked, and it was a whole family of otter. So I woke up my granddaughters and I said, you want to go see some otter? Oh, yeah. I said, okay, we can paddle out, but you've got to be really quiet. No banging the canoe with the paddles, no talking, and we're not going to go very close, but we can watch. So they got in and they were really careful. We paddled out, we got maybe 70 yards from the family. And it was so quiet that early when those otter came up, you could hear them crunching on the crawfish that they were catching in the shallow water. Another time I was up with another game warden, we were on patrol, and all of a sudden from the woods out come a great big bull moose. And that was before we had any kind of a hunting season for moose, and they were pretty uncommon. They'd just been barely moving into Lamoille County. Of course, all kinds of critters. Now it's kind of common to see bald eagles cruise over. But of course, the all-stars are the loons. And the last loon count we had up there through the Friends of Green River Reservoir, there was 14 different loons. 4 nesting pair. They brought off 5 chicks this summer, of which I believe 2 survived, which is about normal when you have a population like that. But not everything was wonderful in the reservoir in the old days, before Forests and Parks took over and established a state park. It used to be the camping areas were a mess. There was toilet paper hanging from the trees. It wasn't all that pleasant in some cases. But one day I was up there in early summer, and I was on patrol. I had my little 17-foot, 25-pound racing canoe paddling along, and I heard an airplane fly over low. And I thought, darn, it's so peaceful up here. Who needs that darn airplane? And then it went kind of out of sight, and I didn't hear it anymore. I said, what the heck? So I paddled up around the big island, and I look, and there's this darn airplane sitting on the reservoir, bobbing away, 2 guys on the pontoons fishing. I said, well, okay, time to get official. So I paddled up to them, and I did my usual, hello, state game warden, you guys having any luck? Nah, we just got here. Yeah, no kidding, I know you just got here. Well, I'd like to check your licenses. Well, the pilot, Doug, and he had a license. He was from Waitsfield. The other guy just sort of looked kind of glum. He was from Massachusetts. He said, nah, I don't have a license. I said, well, you gotta have a license to fish. I'm gonna have to write you a ticket. And I said to the pilot, I said, it's illegal to have any motorized craft on this reservoir. You're in violation. I said, I didn't know that. I said, well, you should have known it. Now you've got a choice. You can either pack up this plane and get it out of here quick, or I'm going to have to impound it and tow it to shore. And you'll get it back after the court proceeding's done. He gave one look, he said, yes sir, we'll be right out of here. After he flew away, I thought, geez, it's a good thing you didn't take me up on that. I could just see me beating the shore pulling a 2,000-pound airplane. But some of us, the paraphrase Aldo Leopold, there's some of us that can live without the sound of the wild, like a yodeling loon. But there's others of us that can't. Woo! Woo! Woo!
Our next storyteller is Dr. Kim Coleman. Kim is a mom, wife, friend, and an avid outdoor recreationist who lives in Williston. When she's not playing on her bike or Nordic skis with her family, who are all here somewhere, you can find her at UVM, where she directs the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism program in the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources.
Forests are many different things to many different people. For some people, they're a source of livelihood and income. For some people, they're a place to recreate and play outside with their friends and family. And for me, they're those things, and they're a place where my kids get lost. Like the time when my son, at age 5, was tired of being quarantined in his bedroom during COVID, and so he decided to climb out the window of his first floor bedroom and go play in the woods behind our house. You can imagine my surprise when I went to bring him a snack and his room was empty and the window was open. Or the time when a few weeks ago, my daughter, after a weekly Wednesday night Nordic ski race at Sleepy Hollow in Huntington, Vermont, decided to take herself out for some extra miles at night, in the dark, alone, without her mittens on. You can imagine my relief when she showed back up, happy as a clam, ready for potluck dinner with her ski friends. Now, you may know that Vermont is a place that has many town-owned forests, a rich history of municipalities owning woodlots. And we're lucky enough to live about 1.5 miles from one of these places. We spend quite a bit of time there. And we were there one day. I was leading a clinic, and my husband was recreating with our family. And our kids were small at the time. Our daughter was a toddler. Our son had just learned to pedal a bike on his own. And in a moment where my husband was giving his full attention to our toddler daughter, our son decided to exercise his newfound skills of bike pedaling and take off into the forest. And my husband didn't react right away. He finished attending to our daughter. He thought, he's not that fast yet. And then he started walking down the gravel path that my son had taken off down, and he thought, oh, he's gone. And he came around a turn and didn't see him and thought, oh, he's really gone. Luckily, we had some friends that were also there that day, and he handed my daughter to a friend and borrowed a bike that did not fit and had 2 flat tires, and took off trying to find our son while the friend that was holding my daughter came and found me, and we put together a search party, and we searched, and we searched, and we searched, and panic started to set in, right? There's a trail at this forest called Cliffs of Insanity, and I was starting to think, what if he fell off a cliff of insanity? And around, I would say, the 30-minute mark, we reconvened in the parking lot, and we were starting to think if maybe we should call 911 when out of the woods he came, totally happy. He had found a trail runner. And when we asked him where he had gone, he said, I was looking for you. While this experience was terrifying for us, I think it was actually great for our son. You see, a Harris poll that was conducted in 2025 revealed that about 45% of kids between 8 and 12 in the United States have never been in a grocery store aisle that their parents are not in. 45%, 8 to 12. 62% of kids who responded to this survey had never ridden a bike or walked somewhere like a school or a park or a grocery store without an adult. So in addition to being many things to many people, livelihoods, places to play, places for wild creatures to exist, forests are a place where we can be independent, where we can, work on our autonomy, where we can adventure, where we can learn how to navigate ourselves. In all of these examples that I've told you about tonight, my kids weren't actually lost to anyone but me. They knew exactly where they were because we had taken them to these places so many times and navigated the trail systems with them that they knew how to do it on their own. And I think when it comes to parenting, that's really all we can ever hope for, right? That we navigate the world with our kids next to them until they can do it on their own. But also, you too. Please tell me before you go play in the woods. Thank you.
Storyteller is Myrna Valerio. Myrna is a native of Brooklyn, New York, a former educator / cross-country coach, ultramarathoner, cyclist, skier, DEI professional, and author of the memoir, A Beautiful Work in Progress. She began running in high school, recommitted to the sport after a health scare in 2008, and started her blog, Fat Girl Running, about her experiences as a plus-size woman in a world of thinner endurance athletes, while training for her first marathon. Myrna's athletic story and her writing has been featured in many, many places, including the viral documentary short, REI Presents The Myrnavator and Runner's World. In 2018, she was chosen as a National Geographic Adventurer of the Year, and since then has appeared on The Kelly Clarkson Show, Access Daily, The Today Show, and Good Morning America. Wow. She currently lives and trains in Vermont with her son Rashid and is wholeheartedly enamored and obsessed with downhill skiing.
Good evening, everyone. Vermont is magic, am I right? I moved to Vermont in January of 2019. After having had a phenomenal week of winter adventuring with a new friend, we snowshoed halfway up Hunger Mountain in really puffy, wonderful white snow under a bluebird sky. We took a snowboarding lesson at Bolton, and I quickly determined that that was not going to be my sport of choice. I actually broke my thumb a couple of years later, but that's a different story. Snowboarding. We hiked up to the tower here at Hubbard Park. We had wonderful breakfast Sammys at Skinny Pancake, if you know, you know. We had beautiful steaming hot coffee from Capitol Grounds. Her husband later on that week made us a beautiful meal with a very large charcuterie board filled with Vermont salumi meats and local cheeses, jams, jellies, and crackers. And then he made us a bowl of ramen that was Thanksgiving themed and had organic turkey from a farm somewhere outside of Barrie, which I then referred to as bar because I thought it was being fancy in French. But now I know it's Barrie and Montpelier. I loved it. I loved my week here. And then I was also staying at the inn at Montpelier, which I then referred to as that. I got up one morning very early at 4 o'clock to go to the bathroom and looked out the window and there were people running. It was -4 degrees. And it was in that moment that I knew that these were my people and that this was a place that I belonged in. Fast forward to September of 2021, my son, who is now 22, my son is absolutely flourishing at Montpelier High School in academics and in basketball, which he had quit a couple of years beforehand, and helped lead them to the state championship in 2022. I am flourishing in my work as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant with brands, outdoor organizations that focus on getting people outside of all ages, races, abilities, etc. I am writing my second book. I'm still writing my second book. I am gaining more and more sponsorships in the trail running, cycling, and skiing spaces. I am living it up, and my family comes every couple of months from Brooklyn to spend time in Vermont, and they absolutely love it here. So I decide that this is the place where I want to spend the rest of my life, with occasional visits to Brooklyn. And I contact a realtor who then starts sending me listings for like $12 million and $5 million, because I was looking for property. And I'm like, hey, Lauren, can you send me something that's more in my price range? How about lower than $100,000? And she says, on it. So she sends me a couple of listings of these wooded areas, and I zero in on one. This one has a dog, and I'm not even a dog person, I'm sorry. I love pets, but it's not in my house. Anyway, she sends me this listing with a photo of a wooded space with a dog in the middle of a trail. And there's something about this space that really calls to me. It really speaks to me. And so I find myself a couple of days later visiting this property with a person, her name is Stephanie McNeil, and she was a BuzzFeed reporter shadowing me because she was writing a book about influencers and influencer economy. The book is called Swipe Up. and that's already dated. Anyway, because we don't do that anymore. We just click on things. We are walking up what used to be a logging road on this property, and it's pretty dark and gloomy. It's dark and gloomy. That day it had been raining on and off all day, and so we're walking up this logging road, and I look at her and I say, I wonder what it looks like when the sun comes out. And in that moment, the very dense, low clouds part just a little bit, and the sun shines her rays on us and on the spot where we were, illuminating not just us, but the ferns, the ground that was glistening with all of the moisture coming up from the underground springs, the tall stands of red and white pines. And she looks at me and says, you know, I'm not religious or superstitious, but I think that's a sign. And I say, I'm not religious or superstitious either, and I think that's a sign. And we stand there just kind of stunned and awestruck at what had just happened. And so we walk back down this logging road, just kind of taking it all in and feeling held and protected by these dark woods. And I say to the seller's agent, who was waiting for us at the bottom, I'd like to make an offer for this property. cash, full price. I don't even know how to do it, but because I never owned anything. And 3 days later, the property was mine. Well, 5 months later, actually. 5 months later, the property was mine, and now my family has a natural space to call home, and they also have a space where they can stand and feel the experience of being held by the dark forest and illuminated and heated by the light and warmth of the sun. Vermont is magic. Thank you.
Next storyteller is Jeff Alexander. Jeff is the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Business Development for Vermont Adaptive Ski and Sports. He has worked in the NFL, MLB, NHL, and Major Indoor Soccer League, as well as various minor league affiliates. He's been in Vermont for over 20 years and has managed events for Okemo Mountain Resort and was the events and sponsorship manager at Killington Resort and Pico Mountain. He's certified as a visually impaired and cognitive adaptive snowboard instructor and an adaptive mountain bike instructor, and also wilderness first aid certified. He's an avid outdoorsman who loves to slide sideways, downhill, and cross country to mountain bike, hike, paddleboard with his wife and daughter. He's also the barn manager for Mother Pucker Farm, where his family has 2 horses and 3 donkeys. His claim to fame is being a Pro Bowl mascot for the Philadelphia Eagles in the mid-90s. Jeff is passionate about making sure that everybody has access to play in Vermont.
So normally my stories are best heard on a chairlift or around a bonfire or in a dark, grungy bar. But you guys got me here on the stage for house floor today, so this is where it's going. Originally from outside Philadelphia, my dad was in the steel industry in the early 70s, so he was running around the country setting up steel mills. So we moved a lot. We moved to St. Louis, we moved to New Jersey, we moved to Indiana, we moved to south side of Chicago. I grew up mainly in the south side of Chicago. Went back to Philadelphia, go to college, study environmental science at Jefferson University. And I realized that I needed to be in the woods, but I was living in Philadelphia. I lived in West Philly, then I lived in the Art Museum area. And I needed to be in the woods. And my wife had, at the time, she wasn't my wife at the time, but we were dating. She was riding horses at Monastery Stables in Fairmount Park. Fairmount Park is one of the largest inner city parks in the country down in Philadelphia. So I realized, I could ride my bike from the Art Museum area all the way down Kelly Drive, get to this park, and there's mountain bike trails there. And I could ride with her. She's on horseback, on my bike. And it was pretty cool for a while there. And all my friends are like, hey, we're going to Vermont, we're going to snowboard, you gotta come up with us, you gotta go. And I'm like, man, I'm a mascot, like if I get hurt, I can't work. And so I can't go to Vermont. They're like, yeah, but there's woods there, man, you're gonna love it. I'm like, no, it's not happening. And then so finally I got sucker in, and we went up to Mount Snow. And we're in Wilmington, we're in a rental house. I just remember one night I'm sitting there, future wife, we didn't get married yet at the time. And I'm looking, and you all know this, right? You see the silhouette of the pine trees, and you see the sky go from blue to dark blue to black. And you see that silhouette, and I'm like, man, I need to have this. Like, I have to have this in my life. And so went back to Philly. I mean, this is a couple times coming up. And I said, you want to move to Vermont? And she's like, yeah, let's go for it. And so she's been in Pub and Forge for 20 years now. So she got a great job. I was like, well, I had a company, I'll sell my company. I'll go turn screws at Killington, grab a shop, we'll figure that out. And so we've been in the town of Tinmouth for 20 years now. Does anybody know where Tinmouth is, by the way? Has anybody ever heard of Tinmouth? All right, awesome, that's what it's all about. So by the way, everything south of Route 4, it exists, it's part of Vermont. Okay, so we all need to know this, all right? Because sometimes they come up here to the State House and they're like, oh, Chittenden County, everything's up north. So anyway, so long story short, I work at all those places you heard of here in Vermont, and then I catch on with Vermont Adaptive Ski and Sports. So the woods brought me here, and so now I want to expose people to the woods. And so we had 2 gentlemen from Washington, D.C. see photos on Instagram of us mountain biking in the woods, and they said, we gotta go do that. So both gentlemen had injuries. Both gentlemen utilized wheelchairs. They jumped in a Subaru, drove up to Vermont. I happened to be on that lesson that day. So we met at the Sherwood Trails in Killington. just north of Route 4, so things do happen north of Route 4. So we're at the Sherburne Trails. It's a part of U.S. Forest Service land. It's managed by Killington Mountain Bike Club. So we get set up in the parking lot. We have 2 3-wheel bikes. They're called Mutes. It's 2 wheels in the front, 1 wheel in the back. It's a hand crank, because gentlemen don't have use of their legs. And so we decided, okay, listen, here's the safety protocol. This is what we're going to do. This is what this trail system is going to be like. So basically, if you've ever been to this trail system, the southern part of it is hardwood forest up by Kent Pond. The center portion of it is this beautiful fern section, and then the lower portion is all pines, tall white pines, really mossy in that area. So I'm with Shannon and Ben. Ben is with 2 folks behind me. I'm the lead for Shannon on this bike tour. So we're cruising. I have his water with me and all the tools for his bikes with me. We ended up getting way ahead of everybody else. So we come around this corner, a couple switchback turns, and we drop down. There's 2 huge glacial deposits at the bottom of this area. And you bike right through it. You can barely fit through it. It's pretty cool. And so Shannon's like, hey, I'm getting a little thirsty, so we stop. And I turn around and I just remember seeing this birch coming out of one of the glacial deposits. It's still sitting in my mind. And Shannon turns to me and says, hey man, he goes, I haven't been this deep in the woods since my injury. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I actually started crying, right? And I was like, holy shit, like, I'm like welling up. And he has this moment too. And so we're both sitting there and I'm like, well, that's what it's all about. That's what we do in Vermont Adaptive Fair. We get people back into the woods. We get them back out biking. So everybody comes around the corner. Now it's 2 grown men crying in the woods, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, no, we're fine, it's all good. And so we ended up having an amazing rest of the afternoon. And so Shannon goes back to DC, Ben goes back to DC. They come back that winter to go skiing. Next summer, we call them up. We got a T-term grant from the Vermont Department of Tourism and Marketing. So we're like, hey, let's do some accessible tourism videos for the state. So we asked Shannon and Ben to come back up to be our subjects. Shannon turns to me and says, hey, I really like here. I think I want to move here. Where should I live? I'm like, well, there's not a lot of accessible housing in Vermont, but we could figure this out. So Shannon ends up moving to Vermont, lives in Killington for a winter. I don't know why he chose Killington for the winter time, because it's a little challenging there. But now Shannon lives in Burlington. He works for NASA. He's a geologist. He works remotely. And the woods brought him here. So our woods are powerful, and they can bring people here. And that's all I got, folks.
Okay, one more. Our final storyteller of the evening is Bill Torrey. Bill Torrey has worked for 40 years in the woods and still has almost all his fingers and toes. He has won 5 NPR Moth Story Slams and has performed on the Moth Main stage in Boston. He's the author of 2 books. The first is The Tata Weenie Club, which demonstrates the serious nature of his writing abilities, and Cutting Remarks, 40 Years in the Forest.
Hello. It's been a cold winter. I've heard the wolves are starting to eat the sheep just for the wool. I started hunting when I was knee-high to a short duck. And I started my logging career when I was 16. The woods is where I found contentment, and it's where I found adventure. For instance, one snowy November day found me sneaking along the top of a ridge in 4 inches of fresh trapping snow. I put 3 deer out of their beds. I got a glimpse of just 2 doe as they went down off the ridge, but the 3rd deer, the one I did not see, was a wicked nice buck. How do I know? He told me. By the size of his bed in the snow and where the urine stain was positioned in it. And when he reached back to scratch an itch, where his antlers touched in that 4 inches of white frosted. Now he's taken 25-foot bounds for the first 200 yards or so, and I'm running along behind him. And then he just slows down to this ground-eating gallop, and I just keep on jogging along. And when he finally starts to slow down, we're deep in the forest. I noticed that he's been always kind of hooking around to the northeast. Same direction those 2 doe went. And as he comes up to the top of a ridge, he stops and then slowly walks down over the other side. Well, I stop there too, and I catch my breath, and I make a major decision. You see, I know that this is just a time and place in the hunt where a wise old buck, he's going to start watching behind him. And if he sees me again, my chances will go from slim to none. And the chance is all a hunter can ever hope for. Because you have to understand that this buck, he knows these mountains like you know the inside of your house. And a 5-mile circle for him, that's just a walk around the block. But I know these mountains some too. And I know that down this ridge, just a couple wagon races there where it hooks around, there's a sagging, what I call a saddle. And if that buck is thinking about getting back to them doe, he might just use that saddle. So I turn off the track and I start running the top of that ridge just as hard and fast as I can. I'm trucking over rocks and through blowdowns and brush and whips, and I come running down into that saddle and I lean up against a big old rock maple. Now all this running's got me sweating like the pig that knows his dinner. And it's only about 25 degrees, and after about 20 minutes or so, I'm starting to shake like a 50-cent ladder. And I know I can't stand still much longer, not if I want to shoot straight. Besides, maybe he ain't coming. Maybe my guess is wrong. And maybe I ought to get my ass back on his track. So I start jogging off in the direction that I hoped he would have come from, when I suddenly stopped. It's hard for me to describe to you what happened. Maybe there's some lost sixth sense that we used to have that's now been dulled by years and years of easy living and store-bought meals. And maybe my life spent under the canopy of the forest has somehow renewed this sense in me. Or maybe it's the gods of the hunt, looking down on their wayward disciple and tapping me on the shoulder, because I'm telling you, it was that strong. It was like somebody reached out and grabbed me and whispered in my ear, now. I know something's going to happen. I know that buck is close. For the next few minutes, the only thing that moves on me is just a slight turn of my head and my eyes as I pick apart that snowy landscape in front of me. When suddenly, out to my right, about 80 yards around the edge of my vision, there's just a flicker of movement. It's the twitch of an ear, the ear of a buck. He's standing broadside to me, watching behind him, watching his back track. And as he turns and looks right at me, the roar from my rifle echoes across them snowy mountains, and he falls right where he was standing. I walk up on an 11-point wizard of the woods. His beauty is mesmerizing. His antlers are thick and wide and massive. I kneel down on the ground beside him, ground that's now anointed by his blood, ground that now feels sacred to me. Because you need to understand that hunting for me is truly a painful paradox. I kill that which I respect and honor and cherish. There is no catch and release hunting. And I thank the gods of the hunt for that, because there is a passion that burns deep within me. And it's because of this passion that come a snowy November day, you'll find me, if you can find me, in the woods, on the track, on the hunt. Thank you.
Big round of applause for these ladies. Lastly, here's some closing remarks. So first we have Danielle Fitzgerald, who's the Commissioner of Forest Parks and Rec. I said Danny because that's her name.
I go by Danny. And what a treat tonight was. Thank you all for coming out to hear a topic that's really special to me. And what all-stars you are. Impressive stories, so wonderful. You shared each of you with us, which was so awesome. I am going to step out on a limb. I am not a storyteller, but at least said I had 2 minutes, so I'm going to tell you a story in 2 minutes. And I'm going to tell you how someone who's dedicated their lives to forests, how I went from being scared of them to loving them. 33 Greenbook Drive was the address of the house I grew up in New Jersey. Right off of exit 8. And if you're from New Jersey or you know it, everything was great at exit 8. At least that's what we thought. The house was white with black ornate shutters. The community was about 300 homes that was just built, that used to be a potato farm. So you can imagine all these new homes with no established trees, but at least every house did have newly planted trees, 2 or 3. And as a future urban forester, I go back to my community now and I was like, someone was really smart back then. Because now, when I go there, the trees are over the house, and it's a great green canopy. My community had this great asset. They had a community park that had tennis courts, they had basketball courts, a pavilion, and it had a baseball diamond that doubled as our kickball field. And the community of kids, we had an awesome kickball team that at one time was all boys. But when I was 10, I said, I'm going to get on that kickball team. And I did, and we had a blast. Every day after school and on weekends, we'd hop on our bikes and we'd go to the park and we'd play all day. And when the street lights came on, it was time to go home for dinner. No cell phones then. It was the street lights that gave us the signal. That park was my happy place, except for the woods behind the kickball field. I was terrified. It was dark. I swear it was haunted. And if I went in, I was not coming out. Well, the boys on the kickball team knew I was afraid, and one day when the ball went into the woods, they dared me to go and get the ball. I was scared, I was trembling, I wanted to be cool, and so I stood up as tall as I can, which is not very tall, and I took 3 steps into the woods. I turned around, hopped on my bike crying, and went home. Fast forward 45 years, the woods are now my happy place. They are the place that I seek, they are the place I dedicate my work to. I play in them. When I need to recalibrate, that is where I go. No dare needed. I voluntarily walk into the woods. We heard stories today of deep connections to the woods. And our woods in Vermont, we are so lucky. We have 75% forested. Our forests don't ask much of us, just to take care of them, and they will give us so much back. Now, if someone dares me to go in the woods, I say, heck yeah, but beware, I may be there a while. I'm going to be standing there smiling, because somewhere between exit 8 and Vermont, I learned not to be scared and to love our forests. Amazing storytellers, and like we like to say at FPR, we are so lucky in Vermont because we are forest strong.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to wrap up here. My name is Jason Batchelder, and I'm the very proud Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife. In case you wondered what department employees do on a night like this that aren't me, we have 5 that I've counted in the audience tonight whom I won't embarrass, but thank you so much for being here. To all of you and to all of my fine employees who came to watch this, it's been wonderful. Yes, Danny, we have heard about grown men crying in the woods. We have heard about epiphanies caused by sunlight. We have heard about children learning to Nordic ski and running away, like mine. We have heard about being anointed in blood. Maggots in your tooth container, and slime mold near my home. I thought I was preparing to talk partnerships with farmers tonight, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. The woods was a wonderful stage setting for me, and certainly why I live in Lamoille County. I butt against the C.C. Putnam and owe my whole childhood to the woods and to farmers. But I wanted to tell a quick story on our way out. When I moved to Lamoille County, I was a game warden at the time, like Eric, although I won't try to match stories or wits with him. He's of the old school, and I'm not. But I met a farmer on an occasion where I had to write one of his hands a ticket. And we call it pinching. If you have to write someone a ticket when you're a warden, you call it pinching. I don't know why. I had to pinch this guy. And the farmer met me at the milk house and wanted to settle this before I had to write this gentleman a ticket, which doesn't happen, but he wanted to try. And he said, you know, Jason, there's not a deer in Lamoille County that doesn't eat my grass. And it was his way of telling this naive young man about the partnership between farmers and the Department of Fish and Wildlife and hunters. And the reason why we are all here today. I wanted to close out by rounding this thought out in my thanks to farmers for paving the way for us all to be here today. We are upwards of 75 or 80% forested, but it was the farmers who got us here, and I can't think of a better way to bring these stories together in a way to honor them and the partnership that we have. The partnership between Forest and Parks, Fish and Wildlife, all of you sharing your stories here tonight, and all of this wonderful audience here hearing these stories of our wonderful Vermont. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, everyone. That's our program for the evening. Again, it's been such a lovely time spent with you and these wonderful storytellers, and I feel like I'm taking a piece of each of your stories home. I'll ask the musicians to come back up to the front and have a wonderful evening. Thanks again.